What if I told you you could skip breakfast every single day, eat in a limited window, and potentially lose fat, improve focus, and simplify your entire life? That's the promise of intermittent fasting. It's been called a fat loss hack, a metabolic reset, even a longevity tool. But there's also another side people don't talk about: hunger spikes, energy crashes, social restrictions, and psychological pressure. So I decided to test it properly, not for 7 days, not for 30 days, but for an entire year, 365 days of intermittent fasting. And what I discovered was not what I expected. Chapter 1: What intermittent fasting actually is. Let's clear the confusion first. Intermittent fasting is not a diet. It is an eating schedule. You don't change what you eat. You change when you eat. Most common formats: 16-8, 16 hours fast, 8-hour eating window. 18-6, OMAD, 1 meal a day. During fasting, no calories, only water, black coffee, or zero-calorie drinks. During eating window, all calories are consumed. That's it. Simple on paper, but very different in real life. Chapter 2: The First Week Shock. The first thing I noticed wasn't fat loss, it was habit disruption, because I had to remove breakfast routine, morning snacks, emotional eating habits. And suddenly, my entire day structure changed. At first, hunger felt intense. But here's something interesting. Hunger comes in waves. It rises, peaks, then disappears. I didn't know that before, so I thought I was starving, but my body was just adapting. Chapter 3: Week 1 Weight Drop, The Trap. By the end of week 1, the scale dropped, fast. But this is where most people get fooled, because the early weight loss in fasting is glycogen depletion, water loss, reduced food volume, not pure fat loss. But psychologically, the brain sees it's working, and that belief is powerful. Chapter 4: Energy Shift Phase. After the first few days, something unexpected happened. My mornings felt different. Instead of eating breakfast, I had mental clarity, less digestion heaviness, more focus sometimes, but not always, because energy wasn't stable. Some mornings I felt sharp. Other mornings I felt low energy and distracted. So fasting didn't create constant improvement. It created variability. Chapter 5: The First Real Challenge, Social Life. This is where intermittent fasting becomes real, not biological, but social, because life is built around food, breakfast meetings, family meals, social gatherings, and now I was skipping meals on purpose. So I started noticing, explaining my diet often, adjusting social plans, resisting pressure to eat. And this is something most people don't expect. Dieting is not just physical, it is social behavior modification. Chapter 6: Hunger Becomes Mental, Not Physical. By week 2 to 3, something changed. Hunger wasn't just stomach-based anymore. It became habit-based, time-based, psychological. For example, even if I wasn't hungry, my brain would say, "It's time to eat." That's learned behavior, not biological need. Chapter 7: Fat Loss Becomes Real. After adaptation, fat loss started becoming more consistent. Why? Because fasting naturally reduces eating frequency, reduces snacking, limits eating window. And for many people, that leads to lower total calorie intake. Not because fasting burns fat, but because it reduces opportunities to eat. End of part 1. Teaser. So far, intermittent fasting looked promising, but this was only the beginning. Because after adaptation, the real effects started showing. Not just weight loss, but changes in mood, energy, performance, and long-term sustainability. In part 1, everything looked promising. Weight dropped, habits changed, routines simplified. But this is where most intermittent fasting stories end, because the first few weeks feel like a transformation. The real test begins after adaptation, when the novelty disappears, when your body adjusts, and when discipline replaces motivation. That's where things started to change. Chapter 8. The Fat Loss Plateau Phase. After the initial drop in weight, something unexpected happened. Progress slowed, not completely stopped, but noticeably reduced. This is what many people call a plateau, but it's not mysterious. It happens because glycogen levels stabilize, water weight normalizes, calorie intake becomes consistent. So the rapid early changes disappear. And now fat loss depends on something more important: long-term energy balance, not fasting itself. Chapter 9. Hunger adaptation changes everything. One of the biggest changes happened quietly. My body adapted to fasting, and that changed hunger completely. At first, hunger felt intense and urgent. But after weeks, hunger became predictable. It came at specific times, not random spikes. This is important because your body learns your eating schedule, so hunger becomes scheduled, habitual, less emotionally reactive. But there's a downside, because adaptation also means the appetite suppression effect of fasting becomes weaker over time. Chapter 10. Workout Performance Effects. This is where intermittent fasting becomes complicated, because training while fasted doesn't feel the same for everyone. I noticed. In some sessions, higher focus, lighter feeling, improved discipline. In other sessions, lower strength output, reduced endurance, slower recovery. Why? Because training performance depends on glycogen availability, hydration status, timing of nutrients. And fasting doesn't directly optimize those factors. So performance became inconsistent rather than improved overall. Chapter 11. The Mental Fatigue Phase. This was more subtle than physical effects, but very real. After months of fasting, I noticed more thinking about food during fasting windows, planning life around eating windows, occasional irritability before meals, not extreme, but present. Because when eating is restricted by time, your brain naturally assigns it more importance. So food becomes more structured, but also more mentally dominant. Chapter 12. The Eating Window Pressure Effect. One unexpected problem with intermittent fasting: you don't just restrict eating, you compress it. So instead of eating freely throughout the day, you eat everything in a limited window. And that creates pressure like, I need to eat enough now. I shouldn't miss calories. I might get hungry later. So instead of reducing food obsession, sometimes fasting shifts it into a shorter, more intense eating period. Chapter 13. Weight loss becomes slow but steady. After months, the pattern became clear. Intermittent fasting did help with reducing snacking, improving structure, controlling late-night eating. But fat loss itself still came down to total calorie intake over time, not fasting windows. So results were slower, more stable, less dramatic than early phase, but more sustainable when done correctly. Chapter 14. The Big Realization During Year 1. This is where everything started making sense. Intermittent fasting is not a fat-burning system. It is a behavior control system. It works because it reduces eating frequency, improves discipline structure, simplifies decision-making, but it does not increase metabolism significantly, magically burn fat, override calorie balance. So its effectiveness comes from structure, not biology manipulation. End of Part 2 teaser. By the end of the adaptation phase, one truth became clear. Intermittent fasting is powerful, but not for the reasons people think. In Part 3, we go into the final year results: long-term fat loss outcome, metabolic changes, if any, muscle versus fat balance, lifestyle sustainability, and the final verdict after 365 days. And most importantly, whether intermittent fasting is actually worth doing long term. In Part 1 and Part 2, we saw the beginning and the adaptation phase. We saw early weight loss, hunger adaptation, performance fluctuations, and mental adjustments. But now we reach the only part that actually matters, the long-term result. Because anyone can change their body for a few weeks. The real question is, what happens after a full year? Does intermittent fasting transform your metabolism, or does it simply change your eating schedule? Let's break it down. Chapter 15, the 365-day weight loss result. After a full year of intermittent fasting, the result was clear. There was fat loss. But it wasn't linear. It looked like this. Rapid drop in early phase, slower steady decline, long maintenance periods, small fluctuations. So overall outcome, moderate fat loss, not extreme transformation, stable long-term control. The key takeaway, fasting helped structure eating, but did not override calorie balance. Chapter 16, did metabolism speed up? One of the biggest claims online is, intermittent fasting boosts metabolism. After 365 days, there was no strong evidence of that. What actually happened was short-term metabolic adaptation, energy balance stabilization, improved eating discipline. But resting metabolism did not show dramatic increase. Because metabolism is mainly influenced by body composition, muscle mass, daily activity level, not eating windows alone. Chapter 17, Body Composition Changes. The most noticeable change was not just weight, but how the weight looked. With consistent fasting, slightly leaner appearance, reduced bloating, more consistent waist control. But muscle gain was not significantly enhanced by fasting itself, because muscle growth depends on training stimulus, protein intake, recovery quality, not fasting schedules. So the body changed, but within natural limits. Chapter 18, the real benefit of intermittent fasting. After a full year, the biggest benefit became clear. It was not fat loss, it was structure. Intermittent fasting helped reduce random snacking, simplify food decisions, control late-night eating, improve consistency. And consistency is what drives results, not the fasting itself. So fasting acted like a framework, not a fat-burning tool. Chapter 19, the real limitations. After long-term use, limitations also became obvious. 1. Not superior to calorie control. If calories were equal, results were similar. 2. Adaptation reduces impact. The body adjusts over time. 3. Social restriction effects. Eating schedules can be limiting. 4. Not ideal for everyone. Some people experience fatigue or stress, so intermittent fasting is not a universal solution. It is a lifestyle preference tool. Chapter 20, the biggest myth after 365 days. After a full year, one myth became completely false. Fasting burns fat directly. It doesn't. What actually burns fat is sustained calorie deficit over time. Fasting only makes it easier for some people to achieve that deficit. That's the real mechanism. Final chapter, the complete truth. So after 365 days, the final conclusion is simple. Intermittent fasting is not magic. It is not a metabolic hack. It is not a fat-burning switch. It is an eating schedule, a structure tool, a behavioral system. And when used correctly, it can help people lose weight. But when misunderstood, it becomes another dieting illusion. Final closing, what I learned after 1 year. If I had to summarize everything in one idea, fat loss is not about when you eat. It is about how consistently you manage your total energy intake over time. Fasting can help, but it does not replace fundamentals. And once you understand that, you stop searching for shortcuts and start building systems that actually last. Final line. So after 365 days of intermittent fasting, the real result wasn't just physical. It was understanding this, The best diet is not the one that works the fastest, but the one you can actually live with.